What's up, everybody? Um, it is the 14th of July. It's been a couple weeks since I did a podcast. I've had kind of a interesting couple weeks. um, I was planning on doing one last week, but I had gotten into town the day before and just whirlwind of things, got caught up, and pretty much just forgot last week. And then the week before that, I was on vacation in California. Let me just start by saying that drive I drove from Salt Lake to Sacramento, and that's got to be one of the most boring stretches of road ever. I mean, it's up there with like Nebraska. I drove across country and Nebraska and Kansas and Missouri, they were pretty bad too. But Nevada is just awful. I didn't have service a lot of the way, and I did my best to try and stay awake. When I drove out there, I actually left at like 11 p.m. So that I'd get there right in the morning. And so I drove all night, and that was kind of an interesting thing because you don't see a lot of the landscape when you're driving at night. And so driving back, I left in the afternoon, and I was like, I have no idea where I am, honestly, because I don't remember seeing this beforehand. So it was kind of like a different drive. I went out there to meet someone that I'd been talking to for a little while, and it didn't turn out exactly the way I thought it would. And part of me felt a little bit, I don't know, a little bit bad, like, because it didn't turn out the way that I thought it was going to. But at the same time, maybe a little bit relieved that it didn't turn out the way that I thought it was going to. It kind of put a damper on the whole trip once things went south. But I'm glad that I went out to California. It was the first time that I've been in that area in Sacramento since I lived there. 18 years. It's been a long time since I was out there. I've been in like San Jose area when my sister was married, and Palo Alto and all that. But back to like my old neighborhood, back to the house that I grew up in, the elementary school that I went to. It was a trip, and the coolest part about the trip for me was the fact that I got to reunite with my buddy. Back in the day, knew him as RJ, and he goes by Randy now, and he's got a kid, and it's crazy because his kid is the same age as that we were when we were like best friends. It was just crazy because 18 years is a long time. How many things happen in 18 years? That's a whole entire life, like childhood up to adulthood, essentially. And yet it was like going home and like seeing my brother, and that was a really cool feeling because like I hadn't talked to him or seen him for several years. It's kind of a crazy story how we reconnected. I think it was like 2011. Me and my buddy Nick, we had reconnected because he had moved. He was my best friend when I moved to Utah. He moved into my neighborhood shortly after I did, and we became best friends because we were like the same age. We didn't have brothers, we had sisters. We were friends. And I think he moved right before high school. It was probably like 9th grade or something, or 8th grade. And he moved to California, back to California from And he ended up kind of like in the same area that I had grown up in prior to moving to Utah. And he moved back like 2011-ish, and we were like partying nonstop. It was a rough month. I look back and I'm like, it was literally only April of 2011, and that was probably the longest month of my whole life. The amount of abuse my body took, no sleep, alcohol, just crazy fun. And one night we were up. It was like 4:30 or 5 in the morning. We've been, drinking all night, and we were sitting there talking, and I was talking about my buddy from back home, California. And he's like, "Are you talking? Is his last name Pistorius?" And I was like, "Man, how did you know that? That's crazy." And he's like, "That's my boy from high school." Like, and I was like, no way. So we look him up on Facebook, right? And we call him, message him on Facebook, like, "Hey, let's get your number real quick. We gotta call you and ask you this." And he was up, and he responded like right off, and he's like, "No way." Could not believe it. I moved from California. Me and Randy had been friends. I moved to Utah. Me and Nick are friends. Nick moves to California. Him and Randy are friends. We'd had conversations about this kid. They'd had conversations about me. There was no communication of names or anything. We were just like, "Oh yeah, my best friend was this and this." And I was like, what a small world we live in when something like that can happen. These two people that I consider to be family they know each other. The odds of that happening, man, come on. That's gotta be in the millions. 1 out of millions. So it was good seeing him. We've grown up. We're pretty different. I mean, that's just the nature of life. Kind of like our decisions and what we're given in life helps to direct which way we go. And that's not always our fault. That's not always under our control. But I was really glad that after all this time, once again, the time hop on Facebook just brings back all these memories. And I think it was 2012 or 2013, I had made some status, and on it I was talking about going back to California, and I was excited to go back. And I never went back. I just had all these things come up, and I just never got the time to go. It took until 2017 to finally get everything together and head out that way. And it took me going out to pursue a girl, basically, that to get me out there. That's crazy to me. So even though it didn't work out with that girl, I'm grateful that she helped to get me out there so that I could see my buddy, could meet my my nephew, essentially. I already have a ton of nephews and nieces, but it was good seeing where I grew up. That brought back a whole bunch of memories, because it really hasn't changed very much. And I look at the neighborhood that I grew up in, and I was like, this place is beautiful. Big trees, just flowers everywhere. Every house was different, and I was like, man, I kind of miss California. Not that I don't love Utah. Honestly, I do. There's a lot of aspects of Utah that come under fire and people complain about. But there's also a lot of really positive things here. And I've learned that after living in the South, after living in California, going back to California and experiencing it as an adult, Utah is not terrible. if you can get past some of the small things, then there's a lot of good. But I understand why people don't want to live here and why they move from here. But it seems like the people who complain the loudest are the ones that never leave. Kind of interesting that that's the narrative on it. I've often thought, like, what am I going to do moving forward with my living situation, my life? What do I want to do with my life? And really the answer to it is I have no idea. One of the things that was brought up was that a lot of my life is in Utah. And that's very true. I have family here. My job is here. I like it here. But that's not to say that I wouldn't like it somewhere else, or my experiences with somebody wouldn't make where I was moving better. I'm at a stage in my life, I believe, that I don't really know ultimately what I'm going to end up doing. I know that what I'm doing right now is temporary, because honestly I couldn't do it for a long time. It kills me, honestly. I mean, there are people that can do it a long time. All my coworkers are older than I am. All my coworkers, I believe, are older than 30, except for one. And so they've continued to do this even at that age. You know, they support families on it. It's doable. I'm not crazy about the money that I make, but over the past year, I've kind of come to terms that money's really not as important to me as it used to be. I used to always have these dreams of being rich, whatever that means. And now, I kind of feel like my opinion on money is I want to be taken care of. I want to be able to take care of those who rely on me. I want to have money to have experiences. And that's about it. I don't need a huge house. I don't need fancy cars. I don't need stuff. Like, this accumulation of whatever it might be, what is that going to do for us? Now, don't get me wrong. I still love sneakers so much. And every time I'm like, I think I'm going to get out of sneakers, I just get dragged right back in because I get some deal and I buy more sneakers, and it's on. It's like, it truly feels like an addiction sometimes. But at the same time, I'm like, I'm gathering sneakers and I'm wearing them and I enjoy them. But what are they, man? Cloth and rubber? I'm spending a lot of money on that when I could spend a lot more money on learning, on having experiences, spending time with people that matter to me. And so it's kind of been a switch. I still love tattoos as well. But that's what I'm talking about. I collect tattoos because I'm slowly getting covered. But in the end, it's like, I won't have any more space that I want to use. And then what? Where does that money go? It goes to experiences. It goes to living. And so, the dreams that I had for, like, this is what I want to do with my money, this is what I want to do in life, a lot of those have gone away because I'm not obsessed with the chase of this money. I've been giving a lot of thought, I guess, to being a teacher. I really enjoyed substitute teaching when I did it. And I think that, like, if you can enjoy substitute teaching, then regular teaching is going to be great. Honestly, because you get the worst attention, the worst whatever when it's a substitute. But for whatever reason, that was a demographic I could connect with, that I felt like I could make a positive influence on. Because I actually had a lot of really good classes. I had some that got wild and out of control, but when I look at it, it's like they listen to me, they respond to me for, I'm not the normal substitute teacher that they had. One part of the teaching that I thought was really interesting is when we're that age, we're kind of just expected to do what we're told, and we follow these strict rules, and it is what it is because we're where we are. And I discovered something interesting. I discovered that if you issue a challenge and you let that group know that that's what is expected, 9 times out of 10, they will rise to the challenge and they'll do what you say. Simply because they're trying to do, what you want them to do. I didn't think that a lot of the rules, I felt like they were pretty arbitrary, and that there was not... I understand why they have them, but at the same time, killing people over rules and getting all mad and upset, what does that do for you? That just works you up. There was a lot of these teachers that are like, you better put your cell phone away, put it in this box, don't even bring it to class, put it in your locker. And, people resist that, and that they don't do that if they can get away with it. I told one of my classes, I was like, look, I'm just going to be straight up with you. All we're doing is worksheets today, and I'm going to be over there on my phone because this is boring, okay? I don't have anything to do. I just have to make sure that you guys know what we're doing. I don't care if you're on your phone, okay? But that also comes with a caveat. It comes with the idea that if I allow you this privilege of being on your phone, listening to music, make sure you have your headphones in. Don't distract other people. Don't be getting up to show other people what's on your phone. Don't be getting crazy on Snapchat. Do you understand? And I think that they were a little bit shocked because they were like, wait, we can actually be on our phones. Like, we don't have to sneak it. We don't have to be texting under the desk. He's going to let us text on over our top the desk. I didn't have any problems with that class. I mean, they sat there. They did their worksheets. I mean, I grade them at the end of the class. Went through their worksheets. Went through everything like that. Once I told them, I was like, look, we're going to be grading, so you need to put your phones up because my phone is being put up. Okay? I'm not up here texting while I'm trying to read the answers off. And they responded. So I think that's really cool because I think that we don't give young people as much credit as they really do deserve, because I think that for the most part, they have a head on their shoulders and they understand more than we think that they do, or more than adults think they do. I mean, I'm talking like I'm this old, wise person. I'm a few years removed. I'm 10 years out of high school. I'm not even 10 years out of high school. 8 years out of high school. So I know what it was like to be there because I hated texting under a desk. I was like, I'm still getting all the work done. I still have an A in this class. What's the problem? And I think for some people, it's definitely difficult because they don't pay attention as well. They might not have it come as naturally, so they need no distractions. And, that makes sense. Like, I would never allow people to be talking or be on their phones or listening to music while there's a lecture going on. Save that for college. I mean, if you even go to class. I mean, these are things that you learn. I think these are things that should be instilled at an earlier age, rather than getting to college and realizing it doesn't matter if you come to class. You better read the material. If you don't read the material, you're going to have a difficult time in class. I skated through high school because I was smart enough to not, study. I didn't have to study to get good grades. Getting to college, it's like, well, I better study because this is a lot harder than high school was. And initially, through like my generals and everything, I didn't study for those either. And I got an associate's degree. It didn't take much. it only took until like my higher education to figure out that it's probably a good idea to read the text. It's probably a good idea to coordinate with people in the class, help study with them, answer their questions. They might answer your questions. And that's honestly when I started to enjoy like going to class, is when I had people that I was like, oh yeah, I read this, and this is my interpretation. Prior to that, I just sat in the corner, put some headphones in, went to sleep if I went to class. And the only reason I'd go to some of those classes was because I had to go to the next class. So I was like, if I'm here already, whatever, I'm going to be here. I had a 7 a.m. class one time, and I didn't ever go to it. I literally went on test day and turned in my essays. And the teacher, I remember the professor very well. I was very grateful that they were lenient with me, because they were like, you're going to fail the class because you never participate and you don't do any assignments. But you have A's on the test and you have A's on your paper. So please come to the last 10 sessions of class, which held 3 times a week. I was like, I can do that. So for 10 sessions, I made it to class, and she gave me an A in the class because I tried a little bit harder. I want to have an influence on people. I don't think that I could be a public speaker. I don't know, maybe with practice. But I also don't feel like I've had anything like catastrophic in my life that would give me any kind of credibility as to why I needed to speak to the masses. Go to schools and talk to people. Well, my motivation is like, I didn't get in a car accident and lose the use of my legs and then I had to fight back from it. A lot of the things I've had to fight back from were personal choices that I made. And maybe that would help somebody, but it's never been crazy. My drug use isn't like some of these people's drug use where they end up like pawning off their mother's wedding ring. They steal it from her, or like, they're robbing houses and they're rock bottom and they're homeless. For the most part, I've had a pretty decent life, and so a lot of the problems that I've had, I've created for myself. So I want to have a reach. I want to have some kind of ability to speak to people, to teach people, to share what I know, because I feel like I do know a lot and I've been through a lot. I think teaching would be great. That it's something that I'm excited about, and I can't wait to learn more about. And the biggest thing for people is always like, oh man, teachers don't get paid anything. And that's true. Teachers really get underpaid. But what is my focus, honestly? My focus isn't money anymore. It used to be, and the thought of being a teacher is like, man, I'm never going to have any money to do anything ever. But it's like, the more you have like experiences in life, the more full and rich your life is. I love that quote. It's like, some people are so poor, all they have is money. That resonates with me, because I know some people, I've had friends that were extremely wealthy that I wouldn't trust with anything, because moral character wasn't there. I've known some very generous people that were very wealthy, very good people, very selfless. And that's great. I don't ever think that I'm going to have that kind of influence with the money. But my hope is that I have the influence through teaching, whatever it may be. I'm a sucker for movies about teachers. What kind of fantasy world do I live in? But shows like Stand and Deliver, that movie came out a long time ago. Who is it? Lou Diamond Phillips and I don't even remember the other guy's name. But the idea that he was teaching calculus to these kids that really didn't know like much math at all, and that he was willing to put in the work, and there were things that he taught to those kids, that was great. Freedom Writers, I love that movie. Hilary Swank, I think. The idea that she could bring together kids of different races, different backgrounds, and have like a unified classroom, to me that was a really good movie. And I was like, if only, the impact that these people have on their students in these movies, it's like, that's a good feeling. I think that the biggest part of teaching, the difficult thing for me, is that there are like things you just can't say, things you can't do when it comes to students. That's kind of restrictive. It's like you can't tell them some of these life lessons because you'll get in trouble, because we want to shelter our youth. Some of the things that we say are too real for other people to understand, and so they are scared of it. My degree is actually in community health education, which can translate into like teaching health, high school health, like secondary education health. My emphasis wasn't towards education, like secondary education. I actually don't think I had an emphasis because I was just trying to finish. But I think it would be very difficult to teach health in high schools in Utah, simply because of the restrictions on the curriculum. And there's such a resistance to all thought and all aspects of health education. It's very much based upon the culture here. Even though there is overwhelming evidence, for example, that comprehensive sex education is actually better than abstinence-only education, because you look at the states where they teach a very good comprehensive sex education course, they have lower rates of teen pregnancy than the schools that have abstinence-only education. States like Mississippi and a couple of the Deep South Bible Belt states have that abstinence-only education and have some of the highest rates of teen pregnancy in the whole entire country. And there's obviously other factors when it comes to teen pregnancy, such as socioeconomic levels. But education plays a huge role. I think that it's apparent that the education isn't making sense to the people that we have running it. But that's ultimately not controlled by smart people. It's controlled by politicians, not by the people who are down on the front lines dealing with it. The fact that they don't teach condom use, kids assume the worst thing that can happen to you if you don't use a condom is that you're going to get pregnant. Something's going to happen like that. And honestly, pregnancy is not the worst thing that happens to you if you have unprotected sex. People act, some STDs, it's like, I'll just take, if I get it, I get it. And I'll take my Z-Pack or whatever and be done with it. Can you realize how devastating it would be if you went blind because you had an STD? Or you ended up with cancer because of an STD? These are serious, okay? Having a kid is not that serious. I mean, that's still a big deal. It's expensive, but it can be taken care of a number of ways. Whether or not you're pro-choice, whether or not you're pro-life. I'm the result of pro-life, okay? I'm adopted. I was given a second chance, or a first chance, period, to be born because I was adopted and I was given up for adoption. These kids, they don't think. They don't use their head. And why is that? Well, I feel like a big portion of it is because they're not educated about it. They don't have this education because of, the religion, essentially, the religion here. The idea that you can tell a kid to not do something and that's going to be that. The best way to, avoid unwanted pregnancy is to not have sex. That's the most obvious thing I've ever heard. Kids aren't that dumb. It's like, maybe you could have sex sitting, you get pregnant by sitting on a toilet seat or something like that. These are things that don't make sense. For the most part, I think that education is what the kid makes it to be. I have a lot of people that I've seen complain about public high school and public education, and they insist on putting their kids into like charter schools and private schools. Some of those are really great, but I went through public high school and turned out pretty good. I understand some of the worries that people have with public high school, just because there's a lot that happens at public high school. They're pretty crowded, a lot of them. I had a fairly large graduating class. I always had more than 30 people in my classes. But if you get lost in that, that's tough, It's hard. But that's not on the teacher. The teacher does the best that they can with the resources. A lot of it has to do with these kids. And a lot of parents don't understand that if they're not willing to put in the work and help their kids, public high school is going to be difficult for them. Public school in general. There's some aspects that I think that should be worked on a little bit. They're really quick to diagnose like ADD, ADHD type of disorders, spectrum, autism, and then just start throwing meds. I don't think that that's a good solution at all. Not one bit. When it comes down to it, I think that we're a medication culture, and if we can fix something via medication, then that's what's going to be the number one option, where it's really not necessarily what's best for the child. I have some nieces and nephews that were tried to get labeled as ADHD or whatnot, and perhaps my sister, honestly, because she homeschools all of her kids, she got a grip of kids too. She homeschools 6 of them right now. Okay, she got 5 of them, because she got 2 babies and then 1 on the way. She's gonna have 8 kids, man. She homeschools all of them, and they're not. Granted, they're kind of weird. They're different, but it's a different homeschool than the ones that I grew up. You knew the homeschool kid because they were kind of weird. The homeschool now, it's there's all these other parents who homeschool, and so they meet up for field trips. They have social interactions, and they learn a curriculum. It isn't just mom's gonna homeschool you now, and we're kind of going to learn a little bit of this, but, I don't really know much about that, so we're going to skip it. It's these are the curriculums that are laid out. Here's the information. If you want to teach your kid at home, go for it, but this is what they need to know. And I think that's really great, because it gives people an opportunity, if they really believe that they can offer their child a more, a different approach, then they can. Yeah, your kid might be hyperactive and have a hard time learning because classroom-based learning is based on one learning style. There's 7 or something. There's a crazy number of learning styles, and it's you have to conform and you have to fit into a box to succeed in public school. And I don't entirely agree with that, just because there's more ways to learn. So that, to me, is why good teachers have such a variety of activities. It isn't all papers. It isn't all worksheets. I mean, I remember having a class that we filled out these, like, chapter guides. Every single chapter of the book, we filled out chapter guides. And then we took a test. And it was the same format. And I did really well on that because that kind of stuff was easy for me. Do I remember most of it? Not at all. But some of the things that I remember are these ones that were like active learning, or we went to a field trip. I made some diorama, group project where we presented or did a skit or something crazy. Those are the things that I remember and that are just burned into my brain. So homeschooling has, the aspect of you can help your kid and teach your kid the way that they learn best. They also avoid a lot of the bad things, I guess. One of my nephews was getting bullied pretty bad. Because he got bigger, but he didn't get taller. So, kids are rude. Kids are awful. They calling him fat. They calling him, chunky, and just picking on him. And he hated school. And then when he started the homeschool with my sister, he responded. He really enjoyed learning. He's really smart. He's very smart and knows a ton about things that I'm like, man, you're not even that old and you know quite a bit more than, I do on the matter. And what's funny is now he's like as tall as I am. And so like he grew into himself. But it's like these kids are rude. And sometimes, I'm like, well, it makes you tough. It makes you stronger. But it's like sometimes it also discourages you from being you. And wanting to do things that you want to do because you get made fun of or whatever. My hope is that like eventually we have more opportunities to teach people, and that that we have like a better group of teachers to pull from. I feel like there's some teachers that just mail it in because they've been doing it so long that to them it's like, I come to work, I'm going to do what I do, and I'm going to go home. They kind of lose the passion, I guess, of like new teachers. I think that these incentives that they give for new teachers, a lot of times, I really hope that it breeds positive teaching. For me, that's what I want to do, I don't want to be a boring teacher. Because I have teachers from high school, I have professors in college that I remember, and I'm like, I would recommend people take their class 100% of the time if they can get into it. I had professors that I would go back to college and look for their classes and be in their classes simply because of how good they were at teaching. I talked for kind of a long time on that. And it's not an issue that I wanted to talk about. I saw on Facebook, one of my friends had made a post that made me think a little bit. And I didn't comment on it because I don't want to get into these long comment threads on posts on Facebook because I just don't have time to deal with that. But he's like, why is it that methadone is free and cancer drugs are so expensive? Now, there's a caveat for that because methadone isn't free, but it's very cheap, relatively cheap. But cancer drugs are really expensive. Cancer treatment is really expensive. And all the comments were really interesting. Because there were so many people that were like, methadone shouldn't be, low cost or free because those people are addicts. And that's not a disease that needs treating. And it's not a disease. It's weak will. It's weak mental makeup. There was somebody on there that was very vocal about it. And so that made me think for a long time. And I thought about it. I slept on it. And I thought about it. And then I saw somebody else had, another one of my friends had commented on a post that was like, addiction is not a disease. And went on and on. And they'd commented on it. And, I kind of creeped their comment because it wasn't for me. But they were like, this is so true. This is the truth. And I just thought to myself, that's wrong. That is so incredibly wrong. Addiction is not just something to be taken lightly. It's not weak willpower. There's an actual physical, chemical change that takes place when you're addicted to a substance or addicted to something else. You know what I think is interesting? This is a little sidebar. I'm not going to go into it a lot. There's this whole thing like pornography, fight the new drug. And all these people were like, oh, Utah and Mormons, and they are worried about pornography, and that's what they're worried about. I think it's a bigger problem than people give it weight. What's interesting to me, there's a physical change in your brain when you're addicted to pornography, and it's almost identical if you look at brains next to each other as heroin. There's an actual physical change when it comes to people who are addicted to pornography. That's crazy to me. That's not a substance. You're not smoking anything. You're simply looking at it. And there's a change in your brain chemistry. So I think that there's more weight given to that. I might go more into that on a later podcast. Because to me, that's really fascinating. But there's a lot of people that were on the post and they were like, we should be funding diseases. Not something that can be controlled by willpower. And I thought about that for a second. I was like, what about all the people that got lung cancer because they smoke cigarettes? They chain smoke cigarettes. Does that mean their cancer is less important than those like that it was genetic? I don't know. According to that argument, maybe a little bit. What about the people with not type 1 diabetes? You weren't born with it. The people who have eaten themselves into type 2 diabetes, eaten themselves into heart disease. Do our funds, should that be an issue? Oh, it's just weak willpower. You couldn't stop eating the donuts. You couldn't stop drinking, and now you have a liver problem. That's weak willpower, right? According to the people who were against the addiction and saying addiction is not a disease, that's entirely what they would be saying. That they look at that and they're like, no. Diabetes is a disease. That's a real disease. Yes, it is. Addiction is a real disease as well. And it's almost insulting to say that those people who are addicted to something don't struggle with a disease. I understand that if you never smoke, you never do drugs, you're not going to ever get hooked on them. And so honestly, that's the best way, I guess, to prevent it is to never start it. But I think it's good that there's ways that people can get help. And that there's things that we can do to help people who struggle with addiction. Because of the nature of my life and just the way I live it, I've always kept it pretty private. It's something I don't discuss with my family at all. It's really hard for me. It's been hard for me. But I feel like there is an aspect of willpower, mental toughness that goes into it. But that's not to say that that reason is why it isn't a disease. I'll tell you, the first time that I ever quit cold turkey drinking, it's funny because now I've done research and I'm like, that was really dangerous. I could have died. Didn't think about that. I just was so tired of feeling the way I did. Tired of the interactions that I had with people when I was drinking. Tired of all that I just didn't ever want to touch it again. The withdrawals that I had were awful. I felt awful. When people say that some things aren't drugs, I'm like, you're stupid. You're so dumb. To say that marijuana is not a drug, to say it's a plant, whatever, that's dumb. I don't agree at all. There's an addictive property to just about everything. It depends on other people. I've been told numerous times that marijuana is not addicting. I've been told that all these other drugs they're not addicting. Oh, I could stop at any time. That may be true, but I think that there is an addicting aspect to it. Maybe not the drug itself, but how do you feel when you're on the drug? How do you interact with people when you're on the drug? For me, that was why alcohol initially was so addicting, was because I'm a relatively shy person, but when I drank, then that gave me the opportunity to interact with people and say whatever I wanted without a filter. The problem came when I was no longer having social situations, but I was still continuing to drink. I have spent quite a few nights drinking by myself. I've spent even in social situations, I've had a couple times where I drank way too much. And it's like, oh, well, what's too much? It's like, you know deep down inside when you have drank way too much. When you're no longer just drinking to have fun, it's too bad that it happens. Recently I spoke with my therapist about the drinking. And you can be an alcoholic and not drink every day. And I'm kind of there right now. That's kind of how I feel a little bit. Is that I have these alcoholic tendencies. I don't drink every day anymore. And the biggest part is for me to not get crazy with it. And so for me, not drinking at all is how I deal with that. Because the littlest bit, and it's like, this opens a Pandora's box that I don't know where it's going. Over time, I believe that changes, and I get better at it. And it's been a big part of, like, not letting catastrophic life events dictate the drinking, telling myself this is not going to force me to drink because I'm better than that. Being centered with myself and where I'm at has helped quite a bit with the addiction. A lot of the addiction came from boredom, different things that I was addicted to, whether it was alcohol or girls or whatever. It was not good coping skills. And so I think the biggest thing for those who struggle with it is you have to fill your time with something else. That's the knock on AA a lot of people have. So you're replacing alcohol with Alcoholics Anonymous. You're going to meetings. You're like, I need a drink, so I'm going to go to a meeting. I'm kind of feeling like I might drink, so I'm going to go to a meeting. That's not entirely a bad thing. I think that I never did the program. I don't really know why. I had the opportunity to go to AA and I didn't. But I read a lot of the literature and I incorporated things into my life that I thought would help. That included like meditation, more spiritual things. And I gotta tell you, if you don't meditate, You should. If you don't meditate daily, you should incorporate that into your life. It doesn't have to be that cheesy. You don't have to cross your legs and om. You don't have to do that. That's not what meditation is. The fact that I take time out of my day to sit in quiet silence to repeat these mantras that I have, it makes such a huge difference with my whole entire day. I have days when I miss meditation. For whatever reason, I wake up late and I get going on the day. And things feel a little bit like scatterbrained, like, what's going on? I need to do something because I feel weird right now. I'm really glad that I figured that out. And, I talk to some people and they're like, dude, you're so Asian. Do you seriously, you Zen meditate? You sit there in a quiet room by yourself. You visualize things in your brain. You're so Asian. And it's like, yeah, Tai Chi's good too. I mean, there's a lot of things that, like, the Asians, Buddhism, all that, Shinto, Buddhism, Hindu, whatever, East Asian religions, they make a lot of sense for my life, regardless of what my race is. That bugs me. But I would honestly encourage every single person to meditate, because for me, it leaves me feeling refreshed and it makes me feel like things make a lot more sense. This podcast has been therapeutic. It's been like meditation once a week for me. I've been able to just brain dump, just completely talk to myself. I used to talk to myself a lot, and I was like, I hope nobody watches me do this. Like, in the car, I would talk to myself. And I figured people just thought I was on my phone or whatever, but I was literally just talking to myself through the day. And so it's been nice to have a podcast where, like, I can talk like that, but then other people can listen to what I have to say, my rambles or whatever. And my head has been in a weird place these past 2 weeks. It's just been like a kind of stressful, just an overload of emotions and feelings of inadequacy, feelings, kind of hurt. But it's been different because of how I've approached it. And I'm like, man, if I'd known this like earlier through life, earlier this year, I might be in a completely different place, because I'm not bothered like I used to be. It's been so nice to just have this idea that I need to let things happen as they happen. I need to do what's best for me. I need to be happy with myself, and I need to work on being happy with myself and not just expect things to happen for me. And just remember that, I guess. I saw a quote the other day. It was like, did you have a bad day today, or did you have a bad 15 minutes that you rode the rest of the day? And I thought about that because I figured the majority of my experiences recently when I've had bad days are honestly because of one thing in my day. And I know, like, people always tell you to count your blessings and stuff like that, and you don't really want to. You kind of get tired. You're like, can I just have a bad day? Can I just feel sorry for myself for the day? And because I used to be like that. It's like, don't tell me about people in Africa not having what I have. Don't tell me about people who, are dying with cancer. Don't tell me about this. Just let me have my pity party. And now I don't have those anymore. I don't want to feel sorry for myself. And so I honestly try to incorporate that into my daily life. It's like, is something bad happening? What can I do to just forget about it and move on. I think that the best thing that I ever did for myself was exactly that. Letting go of a lot of pain and a lot of like resentment and hurt, and being happy. Trying to be happy every day. It's been great. I'm gonna end it here. I want to do some topical podcasts coming up. I'm not 100% sure on guests. Part of me doesn't even want to have them because I like recording this at 12:30 in the morning. I don't want to have to like, oh, can you come over and do this podcast, or can we coordinate times? It's like, I'm just going to talk. I'm going to talk about whatever I want. Honestly, there are not very many people who listen regularly, but I'm always open to suggestions. If you want to talk about something, just hit me up. And we will talk about it. I will talk about it on the podcast. I haven't been able to do as much research for my podcast as I'd like to, just because I've been really tired. But that's going to change. I feel good about it. I don't think I have any cool things coming up. It's not a holiday weekend. I don't have anything going. But here's to making it a good weekend. I hope that everyone has a good weekend. Be safe, and thanks for tuning in.